They threw wine on a stranger, unaware he was the mafia boss behind their $600 million deal. And the destruction began before they even understood what they'd done. You ever step into a room where everyone looked rich, but their manners felt cheap? That was the Aurelio Tower Grand Ballroom. Gold trim climbed the walls like jewelry. Crystal chandeliers hung heavy overhead, throwing soft light across white tablecloths that probably cost more than most people's rent. A string quartet played something elegant that nobody actually listened to. The air smelled like expensive perfume mixed with aged whiskey and grilled steak. Phones were out everywhere. Nobody wanted to miss proof they'd been in the same room as money. On every screen spinning across the venue, one name kept flashing: ValorTech. Their $600 million partnership with a mystery investor group called the Consortium was all anyone could talk about. Staff whispered about it near the service doors. Guests bragged like they'd personally signed the contract. Marco DeLuca moved through the crowd slowly, hands resting easy in his pockets, eyes scanning faces. He wore a simple charcoal suit, clean, fitted, nothing flashy. The kind of look wealthy people ignored because it didn't scream for their attention. He preferred it that way. Let them guess. Security had already stopped him once at the entrance. The bard looked him up and down like he was reading a crime report. "You with catering, sir?" Marco smiled politely and showed his black invitation card with the silver embossed seal, the kind only top-tier guests received. The guard stepped aside, embarrassed. But still. Inside, the same energy followed him. Two women in sequined gowns glanced his way, then moved their clutches to the opposite arm like he might brush too close. A man in a custom tuxedo cut in front of him at the bar and said, "Staff orders last, yeah?" with a smug little grin. Marco just shifted to the side and ordered water. No need to explain himself. If tonight went the way he planned, explanations wouldn't be necessary. At the far end of the ballroom, cameras turned toward the stage as the host tapped the microphone. His voice boomed over the low chatter. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the ValorTech Gala." Heads turned. Applause rose like a trained reflex. Marco stayed near a marble column, close enough to see, far enough to remain invisible. The host smiled too wide. "Tonight, we celebrate a historic partnership. $600 million. A contract that will reshape this city, this market, maybe even the world." You could feel the greed in the room thicken. Then she appeared. Bianca Rossi glided onto the stage in a gold dress that caught every bit of light. She waved like royalty, lips painted in a perfect red line. Beside her stood Damon Crane, CEO of ValorTech, tailored suit pressed sharp enough to cut glass. Everyone watched them. Everyone except the man who actually owned the company waiting to sign that deal, Marco. What most people didn't know about Marco DeLuca could fill a file cabinet the FBI would kill to see. He wasn't just some quiet guy in a charcoal suit. He was Don Marco DeLuca, head of the Consortium, a syndicate so clean on paper it made Wall Street look dirty. Corporate fronts, silent partnerships, shell companies wrapped in legitimate businesses. Money moved through channels so smooth, regulators never saw the ripples. The DeLuca name carried weight in circles most people didn't even know existed. His grandfather built the foundation with blood and loyalty. His father expanded it with strategy and silence. Marco perfected it with something sharper: restraint. He didn't need bodyguards at events like this, didn't need to announce himself. Power that screamed was power that begged for attention. Real power whispered, and when it moved, the world adjusted without understanding why. The $600 million ValorTech deal wasn't just business, it was a test. Marco wanted to see if Damon Crane and his people had what it took to work with someone who valued respect over spectacle, integrity over image. The gala was his chance to observe them up close, how they treated people they thought didn't matter, how they moved when they believed no one important was watching. So far, they were failing. Marco leaned against the column, watching Damon and Bianca soak up applause like they'd earned it. They smiled for cameras, shook hands with people whose names they'd forget by morning, and laughed too loud at jokes that weren't funny. Wealth they didn't build, confidence they didn't earn. His philosophy was simple, something his father drilled into him at 14. Power doesn't need volume, only presence. And Marco had presence. Even now, standing still in a room full of noise, he could feel eyes drift toward him and then away, confused, uncertain, like their instincts whispered something their minds couldn't process. Bianca noticed him again. She leaned toward Damon, lips barely moving, eyes locked on Marco. He doesn't belong here. Damon followed her gaze. His smile shifted into something colder, more dismissive. He chuckled under his breath and muttered loud enough for the people near them to hear. Cheap decor wandered into the wrong ballroom. A few guests laughed. One man in a gray suit glanced Marco's way and smirked. Marco didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't adjust his posture. He just watched. His silence made Bianca uncomfortable. She shifted her weight, clutched her champagne glass a little tighter, and whispered something else to Damon. This time, Damon's expression hardened. He straightened his tie and started moving toward Marco, Bianca trailing behind like she knew a show would end badly, but couldn't resist. Marco's phone buzzed softly in his pocket. A message from his right hand, Luca. "Ready when you are?" He didn't reply. Not yet. The tension in the room built slowly, like pressure before a storm. The orchestra shifted to a darker melody. Minor chords, slower, heavier notes. The kind of music that made people uneasy without knowing why. Marco stayed exactly where he was, hands in his pockets, expression calm. If they wanted to humiliate him, he'd let them. And then he'd remind them why respect was the only currency that mattered. Bianca reached Marco first, heels clicking sharp against the marble floor. She moved with the kind of confidence people wore when they'd never been checked. She plucked a glass of red wine from a passing server's tray without even looking at them, then turned toward Marco with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sweetie," she said, voice dripping with fake politeness, "deliver this to table 7, would you?" She extended the glass toward him like it was an order, not a request. Marco didn't move, didn't reach for it, just looked at her with calm, steady eyes. Her smile faltered. "Excuse me," I said. Damon stepped in beside her, face twisted in mock concern. "Hey, buddy, you lost or something?" He looked Marco up and down slowly, deliberately. "That suit. What is that, a rental? Clearance rack?" A few guests nearby turned their heads, sensing something about to unfold. One man in a navy blazer leaned toward his date and said loud enough to be heard, "Wrong room, buddy. VIP's invitation only." A woman in diamonds added, with a laugh, "Catering entrance is downstairs. Someone should have told him." More eyes turned. Phones subtly shifted angles. Marco stayed perfectly still. His silence did something they didn't expect. It unsettled them. Damon's smirk tightened. Bianca's fingers gripped the wine glass harder. The confident energy they'd brought with them started cracking at the edges. The orchestra, as if sensing the shift, moved into a darker melody. Minor chords, slower, heavier notes, the kind of music that made people uneasy without knowing why. Bianca circled Marco slowly, her expression shifting from amusement to irritation. "You know, if you needed work tonight, you could have actually applied. Pretending to mingle with guests, that's just tacky." Damon laughed, loud and performative. Maybe he thought if he dressed up, nobody would notice. Another guest chimed in, "Security should have caught this at the door." Marco's jaw stayed relaxed. His hands remained in his pockets. He didn't blink, didn't shift his weight, didn't give them anything to feed on. But inside his pocket, his phone buzzed. A message from Luca. "Signal?" Marco's thumb hovered over the screen. Not yet. Bianca stepped closer, invading his space now, testing how far she could push. "Seriously, are you going to stand there all night, or are you going to leave like you should have from the start?" Damon added, "Or we can have security escort you out. Your choice. The crowd around them thickened, a semicircle of wealth and judgment. Some looked curious, others looked entertained, a few looked uncomfortable, like they knew something was wrong but couldn't place it. Marco finally spoke. His voice came low, calm, almost gentle. I'm fine where I am. Bianca blinked, caught off guard by the quiet certainty in his tone. Damon's face flushed. You're fine? He stepped closer, chest puffed. You don't get to decide that here, pal. Marco met his eyes without flinching, still calm, still present. The tension thickened like smoke. Bianca's lips curled into something cruel. She raised the wine glass slowly, deliberately, like she was making a decision she'd been wanting to make all night. Maybe, she said softly, you need a reminder of where you actually stand. Damon snatched the wine glass from Bianca's hand before she could finish the thought. He raised it high, like a trophy, making sure every eye in the room could see. Bianca's smirk widened. She turned to the crowd, voice loud enough to carry, "Show him where he belongs." A few guests gasped. Others leaned in, phones already lifting. One guest typed fast, "Cheap help gets a wine bath." Another recorded the whole thing, caption already forming, "When you crash the wrong party." Marco stood perfectly still. Wine dripped on his suit onto the polished floor. He didn't flinch, didn't curse, didn't shout. He lifted 2 fingers to his jaw and wiped slowly, deliberately. The gesture looked almost elegant, a quiet assertion of control and a moment designed to break him. Then he adjusted his sleeves, smoothed his collar, straightened his posture. And without a single word, he turned and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted instinctively, like they weren't sure whether to laugh or step back. Bianca watched him go, satisfaction spreading across her face. She leaned toward Damon and whispered loud enough for nearby desks to hear. Finally, he took the hint. Damon chuckled, handing the empty glass to a passing server. Should have left an hour ago. Laughter rippled through the crowd, nervous at first, then bolder. Someone clapped. Another guest raised their drink in mock salute. But near the service entrance, a server stood frozen, tray balanced in one hand, watching Marco's back as he disappeared through the double doors. She murmured to the bartender beside her, voice low and uneasy. He walked out like he owned this place. The bartender glanced toward the exit, frowning. Yeah, that's what worries me. Outside the ballroom, the hallway stretched long and silent. The music faded behind Marco, replaced by the soft echo of his footsteps on marble. He didn't rush, didn't look back. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and opened the message from Luca. His thumb moved across the screen. 5 words. Cut the deal. Lock everything. He hit send. Then he kept walking. The hallway outside the ballroom felt like stepping into another world. Cold, quiet, heavy silence pressing against the noise Marco left behind. No orchestra, no laughter, no clinking glasses, just the hum of air conditioning and the distant murmur of voices through thick walls. Marco's footsteps echoed as he moved toward the elevator, each step measured and calm. Wine still clung to his suit, dark stains spreading across the fabric, but his expression remained untouched, unbothered. He stopped near a tall window overlooking the city lights and pulled out his phone. The screen lit his face with a pale glow. 1 contact, 1 call. Luca answered on the first ring. Ready, boss. Marco's voice came low, steady, final. Cut the deal. Lock everything. Understood. No hesitation, no questions. Just execution. Marco ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Across the city, in a high-rise office overlooking the financial district, Luca's team moved like clockwork. Legal notifications fired across encrypted channels. Legal attorneys received their orders and began drafting termination documents, ironclad, immediate, irreversible. Banking channels froze. Accounts tied to Valortech's partnership locked down in seconds. Transfers halted mid-process. Credit lines collapsed. Every financial artery connected to the $600 million deal shut off like someone had flipped a switch. Contracts revoked. Digital signatures retracted. Partnership agreements voided. The entire framework holding Valortech's future together disintegrated in real time. All of it executed in under 3 minutes. Marco reached the elevator and pressed the button. The doors opened with a soft chime. He stepped inside, alone, and watched his reflection in the polished steel, calm, composed, untouched by the storm he'd just unleashed. The elevator descended smoothly. Soft jazz played through hidden speakers, a strange contrast to the destruction unfolding floors above. When the doors opened into the lobby, a few guests lingered near the bar, laughing, oblivious. A couple waited for their car, scrolling through phones. A valet rushed past, keys jingling. Marco walked through them like a ghost. No one noticed. No one cared. He stepped outside into the cool night air. The city stretched out before him, glittering towers, moving lights, the hum of traffic in the distance. Behind him, the Aurelio Tower stood tall and gleaming, unaware that inside its walls, an empire had just begun to crumble. Marco didn't look back. He moved toward the street, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed, expression unreadable. His phone buzzed once, a confirmation from Luca. Done. Notifications sent. Accounts frozen. Legal team standing by. Marco didn't reply. He just kept walking. Inside the ballroom, the first emergency alert hit. A phone buzzed on a table near the stage. Then another, then 5 more, then 20. Screens lit up across the room like fireworks. Executives pulled out their devices, faces shifting from confusion to alarm. One man near the bar stared at his phone, voice rising. "What the hell?" A woman in a silver gown gasped. "My account just locked." Another executive grabbed his colleague's arm. "Check your email, now." The music faltered. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The energy in the room twisted from celebration to chaos in seconds. And somewhere outside, walking beneath the city lights, Marco DeLuca disappeared into the night. The collapse had begun. The music stopped mid-note. The orchestra froze, violins suspended in the air, conductor's baton held mid-swing. Guests turned toward the stage, confused, waiting for an explanation that didn't come. Then the screens flickered. The Valortech logo vanished, replaced by spinning loading icons, then error messages, then nothing, just black screens reflecting the stunned faces staring up at them. Phones buzzed like a swarm of insects. Alerts flooded in waves, emails, notifications, emergency messages from banks, lawyers, partners. An executive near the bar grabbed his phone with both hands, face draining of color. "My accounts. They're frozen." A woman in diamonds turned to her husband, voice shaking. "The wire transfer. It's been reversed." Another man shouted across the room. "Who authorized this? Who the hell authorized any of this?" Panic spread like wildfire. Executives clustered together, screens glowing against their pale faces, voices rising in overlapping chaos. "Check your email. Call legal. This can't be happening." The host stumbled back onto the stage, tie loosened, face slick with sweat. He tapped the microphone twice, the sound cutting through the noise like a knife. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. "The signing has been suspended by upper authority, effective immediately." Silence dropped like a hammer. Then the room exploded. "Suspended? What upper authority? We're in the middle of a gala. You don't suspend a $600 million deal in front of 300 people. Damon stormed toward the stage, face red, fists clenched. "Who gave that order? I'm the CEO. No one suspends anything without going through me." The host looked like he wanted to disappear. "Sir, the directive came from the top, from the Consortium itself." Damon froze. "The Consortium? That's our partner. They can't just... They can, a voice interrupted from the back of the room. And they did. Near the far wall, someone held up their phone. The screen glowed bright, a video playing on loop. The wine incident. Damon pouring red wine over Marco's suit. Bianca smirking. The crowd laughing. Marco wiping his jaw with 2 fingers and walking out in perfect silence. The caption underneath read, "They poured wine on a man who wasn't the man to mock." The video spread through the ballroom like a virus, phone to phone, screen to screen. Whispers turned to gasps. Wait, who is that guy? Someone said he walked out like he owned the place. Why would they dump wine on a guest? A woman near the entrance leaned toward her friend, voice dropping to a horrified whisper. Oh my God, I saw him at the door earlier. Security almost turned him away. Another guest stared at the video, replaying it. He didn't react. He didn't say a word. Who stays that calm after being humiliated? Then the ballroom doors slammed open. A board member stormed in, older mon, gray suit, face twisted in fury and disbelief. He marched straight toward Damon and Bianca, stopping inches from them. You idiots, he hissed, voice shaking. You insulted Don Marco DeLuca, the Consortium's owner. The room went dead silent. Damon's knees nearly buckled, his mouth opened but no sound came out. Bianca staggered backward, hand flying to her chest. Her voice cracked, barely a whisper. We poured wine? On our investor? The board member's eyes burned. Not just your investor, the man who controls the entire deal. Every dollar, every signature, every goddamned contract. Bianca's champagne glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. Damon grabbed the edge of a table for support, face ashen. No, that's not... He looked like... Like what? Like someone you could disrespect? Whispers erupted across the room, sharp and vicious. They destroyed the company. In one night. Over a glass of wine. A server near the kitchen doors murmured to another, Told you he wasn't staff. The other server shook her head slowly. They messed with the wrong man. Bianca sank into a chair, mascara already streaking down her face. Damon stood frozen, staring at nothing, the weight of what they'd done crashing down like a building collapsing in slow motion. The ballroom didn't feel like a celebration anymore. It felt like a funeral. And somewhere outside, Marco DeLuca kept walking. By sunrise, the story had gone global. Executive couple humiliates mafia investor at luxury gala blazed across news sites from New York to Tokyo. The wine video looped endlessly on social media, millions of views in hours. Each replay another nail in Valortech's coffin. 600M deal dead after wine assault video, screamed another headline, accompanied by freeze frames of Damon's smug face and Bianca's cruel smirk. The comments section became a battleground of mockery and rage. Imagine being so arrogant you pour wine on a billionaire and don't even know it. They humiliated the wrong man. This is what happens when entitlement meets reality. Career suicide in 4K. Beautiful. By 9 a.m., sponsors started withdrawing. One by one, partnership announcements vanished from websites, press releases were quietly deleted, emails went unanswered. Valortech's stock value nosedived. 20% in the first hour, 40% by lunch. By market close, the company had lost nearly 70% of its value. Investors fled like rats from a sinking ship. Board members held an emergency meeting that lasted 12 minutes before 3 of them resigned on live television. Cameras caught them walking out of the building, refusing to comment, faces grim and final. One board member stopped long enough to say, "This company is finished, and everyone knows why." The remaining executives scrambled to contain the damage, but there was nothing left to contain. The foundation had crumbled, the empire had collapsed, and the world was watching it burn in real time. Damon and Bianca's phones never stopped. Death threats flooded their inboxes, hate comments piled up faster than they could delete them. Their social media accounts became graveyards of mockery and venom. Hope the wine was worth your career. You disrespected a dawn sleep with one eye open. Karma served in a wine glass. Photographers camped outside their penthouse. News vans lined the street. Reporters shouted questions every time the curtains moved. Their luxury home, marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, a view that cost $4 million, had become a crisis bunker. The curtains stayed drawn, the lights stayed dim, they stopped answering the door. Bianca sat curled on the couch, mascara streaked down her face, phone trembling in her hand. She scrolled through the comments, each one worse than the last, voice breaking as she whispered, "We destroyed everything in a single moment." Damon paced the living room like a caged animal, tie hanging loose, shirt wrinkled, hair disheveled. He'd stopped sleeping, stopped eating. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Marco's face, calm, unbothered, wiping wine from his jaw with 2 fingers. "How did we not know?" Damon muttered, voice hollow. "How did no one tell us who he was?" Bianca looked up, eyes red and swollen. "We didn't ask. We didn't care," she said. Silence hung between them, thick and suffocating. Damon sank into a chair, head in his hands. "My career is over, yours too. No one will touch us after this. We're toxic." Bianca stared at the floor, voice barely a whisper. "We're worse than toxic. We're a cautionary tale." The room felt smaller with every passing second. The walls pressed in. The air grew heavier. Damon's phone buzzed. Another email, another resignation, another door slamming shut. He threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor. Bianca flinched but didn't move. She just sat there, numb, staring at nothing. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Time blurred together in the silence. Finally, Bianca spoke, voice fragile and desperate. "There has to be something we can do, some way to fix this." Damon didn't respond at first. Then, slowly, he lifted his head. His eyes were hollow, but something flickered behind them, something small and desperate. "There's only one option left," he said quietly. Bianca met his gaze. "What?" Damon swallowed hard. "We have to find him and beg." Bianca's breath hitched. "You think he'll listen?" Damon stood, jaw tight, shoulders sagging under the weight of everything they'd lost. "I don't know, but it's the only move we have left." They sat in the wreckage of their empire, broken and desperate, knowing they'd destroyed themselves with arrogance, ignorance, and a single glass of wine. And somewhere across the city, Marco DeLuca's life continued, untouched, unbothered, unmoved. The drive to Marco's estate took 2 hours. 2 hours of silence broken only by the hum of tires on asphalt and the weight of everything unsaid. Damon gripped the steering wheel like it might keep him from drowning. Bianca sat in the passenger seat, makeup free for the first time in years, eyes swollen and red, staring out the window at nothing. They passed through the city, through the suburbs, past gated communities that suddenly looked cheap compared to where they were headed. The road wound along the coast, cliffs dropping away to the ocean below, waves crashing against rocks in the distance. Then they saw it. Marco's estate sat perched on a private peninsula, stone walls, iron gates, sprawling grounds that stretched toward the sea. Simple, elegant, untouchable. Damon pulled up to the gates and stopped. No intercom, no keypad. Just solid iron and silence. They waited. Minutes stretched into an hour, then 2. The sun climbed higher, heat pressing down on the car. Bianca's hands trembled in her lap. Damon checked his phone obsessively, though no one was calling anymore. They looked small sitting there, defeated, like beggars at a king's door. Finally, the gates opened. Not all the way, just enough. Just wide enough for them to know they'd been seen. Damon parked near the entrance and they stepped out, legs unsteady, hearts pounding. The ocean breeze carried salt and cold. The estate loomed quiet and still. Then Marco appeared. He walked down the stone path toward them, dressed in a simple black shirt and slacks, hands relaxed at his sides. His face showed nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no emotion at all. Just calm. He stopped a few feet away, studying them like artifacts in a museum, curiosities from a world he'd already moved past. Bianca broke first. Her voice cracked, tears spilling over before she could stop them. "We didn't know who you were." Marco's gaze didn't waver. He let the silence sit for a moment before speaking, his voice quiet but cutting. "That was your first mistake." Bianca flinched. Marco continued, each word deliberate. "Thinking you needed to know a person's title before giving them respect." Damon stepped forward, hands raised like he was approaching something dangerous. "Mr. DeLuca, Don DeLuca, we were wrong, completely wrong. We weren't thinking." "You were thinking," Marco interrupted softly. "You were thinking exactly what you always think, that power gives you permission, that wealth makes you untouchable." Damon's throat tightened. "We'll do anything, anything, whatever it takes to fix this. We still have assets, connections. We can rebuild the deal, restructure the terms." Marco shook his head once, slowly. Final. "You lost everything the moment you chose pride over decency." Bianca's knees buckled slightly. She grabbed Damon's arm for support, voice breaking into a desperate sob. "Please, we've lost everything. Our company, our reputation, our future. People are threatening our lives. We have nothing left." Marco's expression didn't change. You had respect. You had opportunity. You had a choice. He paused, letting the words settle like stones. You chose humiliation. Now you live with the cost. Damon's voice rose, desperation bleeding through. "We made a mistake, one mistake. Does that deserve losing everything?" Marco's eyes hardened just slightly. "You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. You chose to treat someone like they were beneath you because you thought no one would see, no one would care." He stepped closer, voice dropping lower. "But I saw, and I cared." Bianca fell to her knees, hands clasped together, tears streaming. "Please, please, we're begging you." Marco looked down at her unmoved. "You're begging now because you're desperate, not because you've changed, not because you understand." Damon's voice cracked. "Then help us understand. Teach us. Give us a chance to prove we've learned." "No." The word landed like a blade. Marco took a step back, hands still relaxed, posture still calm. "The deal is dead. Your company is finished. And my door?" He met their eyes one last time, expression unreadable. "Closed." He turned and walked back toward the house, footsteps steady and unhurried. Bianca sobbed into her hands. Damon stood frozen, mouth open, words dying before they could form. Marco reached the entrance, paused for just a second, and spoke without turning around. "Walk carefully. The world is smaller than you think." Then he stepped inside. The door closed with a soft, final click. Damon and Bianca stood in the driveway, alone, the ocean wind cutting through them like glass. The gates began to close behind them. No second chances, no redemption, no mercy. Just silence. And the long, empty drive back to nothing. The drive back felt longer than the drive there. Damon and Bianca returned to their penthouse in silence. No words left, no hope remaining. The photographers were still camped outside. The news vans still lined the street. But the questions had changed. Now they asked about bankruptcy, about criminal investigations, about whether they'd face charges for fraud, for misrepresentation, for the lies they'd built their empire on. Inside, the penthouse felt like a tomb. Marble floors that once gleamed now reflected nothing but failure. The view that once symbolized success now mocked them with its indifference. They were broken, jobless, their reputations destroyed beyond repair. No company would hire them, no investor would touch them, no door would open. They'd become exactly what they feared most: irrelevant. Within the month, Valortech filed for bankruptcy. The announcement made headlines for a day, then disappeared beneath newer scandals, fresher failures. The company that once commanded $600 million deals dissolved into legal proceedings and liquidation sales. Damon and Bianca's names became cautionary tales whispered in boardrooms and business schools, examples of what happened when arrogance met consequence. But the world kept turning. Marco's Consortium moved forward without pause. Within 2 weeks, they partnered with a competitor, a company that valued respect, integrity, and the quiet power of doing business the right way. The deal closed for $650 million, $50 million more than Valortech would have received. No fanfare, no gala, just clean paperwork and mutual respect.
Marco stood on his balcony overlooking the ocean, hands resting on the stone railing, the salt breeze cool against his skin. The sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. He thought about his father's words, spoken years ago in a quiet moment. Power is not in revenge. It's in reminding the world that respect is the only currency that never loses value. Marco had reminded them, not with violence, not with threats, just with the truth, that consequences existed, that dignity mattered, that no title or bank account could replace basic human decency. He took a slow breath, eyes scanning the endless ocean, untouched by the chaos he left behind. His phone buzzed. A message from Luca. New partnership signed. Clean clothes, no issues. Marco smiled faintly and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Somewhere across the city, Damon and Bianca packed boxes in a penthouse they could no longer afford, their empire reduced to cardboard and regret. And on a quiet balcony overlooking the sea, Marco DeLuca remained exactly where he'd always been, untouchable. They lost their empire in one night, and all he lost was a suit. If you want more stories where power shifts in a single moment, where respect becomes the ultimate currency, and where quiet justice lands harder than any shout, hit that subscribe button and stay locked in. We bring you the stories that remind you dignity is never negotiable, and consequences are always waiting.